And then we move into uh, one of the greatest movements of all time. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah.
The Adagio sostenuto, and finally we change key to F sharp minor. And we're seemingly in a really dark place. I think it was Wilhelm von Lenz that says we're now in a mausoleum. We're inside some
Yeah.
very dark thematic matter here. Okay, tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about this movement.
Yeah, there's a religious aura to the suffering in the beginning, in the depths and the repetition to a rather simpler chords in F sharp minor, and then there's this move to G major in a higher register that you immediately feel like a moment of of pleading, of salvation. The themes are very religious. What's then interesting is, because Beethoven has in his early period, he loves writing long, slow movements that are actually can be very meditative and religious in atmosphere. Like there's a sense of the sacred. In the middle period, he seems much less interested in that, and writes either introductions or maybe like a funeral march, or tries different options and is very innovative. And then in the late period, he goes back, especially here, to writing this kind of large, slow movement where the sense of time um, is slowed. And so, but in this movement, he seems to then invent other composers who will come later, one after the other. I mean, there's a part that sounds suspiciously like a Chopin nocturne because of the ornament. The theme comes back ornamented and with a accompaniment that sounds like Chopin. There are modulations. There are passages that sound like Schubert, where your right hand crosses over your left and plays low bass lines that are questioning. There's Wagner with chromatic modulations because the half steps are so important and it's incredibly sensual. There is Brahms' Fourth Symphony shows up suddenly in the middle with the falling thirds, which Brahms was obsessed with falling thirds. But here, really, you hear Brahms' Fourth Symphony, uh, and then again, though, what I find really mind-blowing is that, all this stuff I'm saying that sounds prophetic and the form of the movement is still like a Beethoven slow movement. Like if you zoom out, it's like it's still following his rules and the form. There's like the coda that it's just that everything is more delved into and beautiful, and every single part uh, has something that's so special, including and the coda is unbelievable. So yeah, I would like to talk about this issue of tempo is really interesting because yeah, there are sometimes these perform. The problem I have with a very slow tempo is I can't hear the long line
Right,
anymore.
right. Because there are 25-minute versions of this movement,
Yes,
right?
there really are. And here we have his metronome marking again, which is perhaps fast. Um, or perhaps it's just right. I don't know. We also have Czerny says his metronome markings are just right, and people who complain about how that's too hard just need, if with adequate practice it can be done, is the line from Czerny. Yeah. So, but in this case, the other issue I've had with, because I've experimented, like with playing a very slow, beautiful adagio, is it's sort of the piece becomes overwhelmed by that movement, in terms of how it relates to what came before and what'll come after. So, but this is a why I mean, this piece is a great thing to take on, and for the audience. Yeah,
Basically, Beethoven has taken, as you said, normal Beethoven slow movement sonata form and sort of stretched it like this, but there's also, it goes very deep as well, and
yeah,
it's a very complex harmonic structure. So the whole thing is, it is still one long arc that you have to get across. It's not in bits, and that's hard if you're going to do this in 25 minutes, all right? And it's even hard
yes,
because if even 15 minutes is very hard to do because
very
it's
hard.
long range thinking at the highest level. At the same time, this piece, I mean, for the, just to let the audience know, it is a piece that is very redemptive. I mean, it begins very, very dark, but as you said, there's that moment just in the first theme where there's this kind of crack of light that sort of breaks through.
Yeah,
It sort of, again, this sort of semitonal kind of shift to G major from F sharp. And the interesting thing for me is that crack of light that comes just at the end of that theme is a quotation. It seems like a quotation from the Benedictus of the Missa Solemnis. In fact, it's also in G major.
yeah,
And so you have this thing that comes in and then it disappears. But then somehow in the course of the movement, that light gets brighter through
yeah.
this thing. And then you have this extraordinary moment in the recapitulation when the theme comes back, this very dark theme comes back. But the whole thing is kind of, I don't know how you describe it, sort of decorated with a kind of
It's
filigree
extremely
kind of pattern.
ornamented, and the theme shows up displaced rhythmically, so it's sort of floating. And it's funny, like um, I when I play this movement and work on it, I don't get a feeling of the word darkness. There is music that we play that is unremittingly, bleak and dark and tragic. And I don't really, I get a sense of grief, but I don't associate this movement. This movement is incredibly hopeful,
Hmm.
actually, and redemptive. And I think the ending, the way that it ends in major and is visionary in that way, and looking beyond what happened, somehow what's expressed there is, and of course the movement ends leaving you wanting something else, right? Like
Yes.
somehow, even though it's such a long cadence, right? So absolutely, I agree that it's a redemptive work, which is interesting when you think about the very opening sounding so, um, you know, well, I mean, it's like something from the Mass, right?
Right, it is.
Um,
Yes, it's definitely something from the mass, something that needs redemption.
yeah,
That's true, and
yeah,
I should mention too about this piece that the Brahms. You mentioned the Brahms four. I feel
yeah,
like I ought to say this. He knew that guy that was making transcriptions of the sketches of the Hammerklavier, the sketches that are now lost, and so it's not coincidental that. Brahms uses that again. It's a kind of theme that comes out of nowhere. You're not expecting it to arrive. It's never been there before, and it sort of comes
yeah.
right in the middle in the development section of the slow movement. And so Brahms just takes it and makes
Yeah.
it into a symphony basically.
One of the great symphonies. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So there are many prophetic things in this piece.